Everybody, welcome back to the ATI podcast. We're here for episode 112, and we have Mike McGinnis here from Rid of Me and many other popular acts of the past, which we'll get into some of that. Fight Amputation, a personal favorite of mine from back in the day. How are we doing this evening, Mike?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, sir. We thank you so much for doing the show. And it's going to be a real pleasure, of course, because, I made a mention of it just briefly ago and before we got on air that I was a big fan of yours back in the day in the iteration of Fight Amputation, which turned into Fight Amp, of course. And like what you guys were doing at that time was very adjacent to some things that I was attempting musically. So I always felt like, kindred spirits in that, musically, that is. So big fan of like the sludgy metal stuff, that's the kind of stuff I used to play back in the day too.
Awesome. That's awesome to hear. I'm stoked to talk about all of it with you, and I appreciate you having me.
We're going to be talking a lot about Rid of Me today, and a big fan of what you guys are doing present day with that project, and get into how all that's coming together for you guys now. I think it's about 4 or 5 months since you guys have released that record now, and a lot of critical love and acclaim out the gate, at least that I personally noticed. How are you feeling the love out the gate with this project? I know it's just a few years old at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this record especially exceeded expectations, I knew that we were kind of like doing something a little more like, we definitely viewed the songwriting and the recording process as a little more band defining than anything that this particular band has done yet. So we knew that on a personal level, but you know how it is. Like sometimes things hit and sometimes they don't to other people, regardless of how you feel about them. And this one seemed to hit. So I'm very, gracious for all the kind things that have been said and now that we have some tours lined up and getting some cool offers and stuff, and really all I can hope to do is just turn it into a record that's even better than the one we just made. So
yeah, which is hard to fathom because, man, this was one of our favorite records last year. You guys made our lists. We do year-end lists, and you were in my top 20. You were my co-host in his top 10. So I
That's
this
awesome.
one definitely hit us emotionally. It's doing it on every level too. It's got the sonic pieces that we look for in music. It's got that beauty but angularity at the same time. There's real life situations being discussed in the lyrics. Lead vocalist and bassist Rosenberg, amazing. All the vocal range and ability there. Just, you guys are hitting on all cylinders with this band, I think.
Thank you so much. We put a lot into the band, but in this record in particular, so it's amazing to hear all that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and you also mentioned some of the, bands and things that you guys had the opportunity to play with even recently, and I guess in the future I've noticed, you guys got things going on with Gouge and Metz and various other bands, and those are all bands that I'm personally a big fan of, and you all are different but similar enough that I think that's a really fun build to even see.
Yeah, that's just in a couple days here now, which is it's our first hometown show of the year, and then we leave for tour on Friday with Hears, who are friends from Philly. So we're doing the East Coast, and then there's a bunch of other shows and a fall tour that aren't announced yet, so I guess I can't really quite talk about them, but it's a lot of cool shit happening, and we're stoked on it. We're basically spending this year kind of supporting the record a little bit. Our main goal though is always songwriting, so always happy to tour and play awesome shows with like-minded bands, but kind of can't wait to get back and make another one.
It's this whole songwriting process and being excited about what you're writing, what you're doing, what you're creating. It kind of puts that wind in your sails and makes you that much more excited to kind of get back into that vicious cycle, and then go out and promote that album and tour and support that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you only make so many full lengths in your life, even the most prolific people. So those are like these huge mile markers for me. So this one was a big one.
Yeah, I can imagine. And, again, being a fan of various bands that you've been in over the years, this is up there with anything else I feel like personally that you've done. And this album in particular kind of floored me because, you could see the iterations of where this album eventually became and matured into in some of your guys' earlier work. But, I don't know. It just seemed like it leveled up emotionally for me. And I think that's probably why it's had such an impact with a lot of folks.
Yeah, I think so too. And, that kind of just happened naturally. I think all of us, between the first album and the second album, we all had major life changes, and Iteria wrote all the lyrics. So a lot of that comes from his experience. But at the same time, even in the songwriting, like, all of us like really like went through some metamorphosis, and I think we were just kind of like making this album as that stuff was happening. Not to mention we also brought John in on second guitar, and just like
Yeah.
me and John started Fight Amp together, and we were the only two members that were there from front to back. So he was my creative partner for years. And so basically the people I'm playing with now are like these people who I have just this long-standing like creative relationship with, and it just all went in ways that weren't really planned out, but ended up
Sure.
showing, I think, in the way the record sounds and like the messages that are in there, and so and
Yeah.
the emotions that are conveyed.
I think certainly like the comfortability that you all have and the familiarity with each other. I mean, there's a lot of advantages we can talk about at a surface level that is, just the creative shorthand that there is. But, having that type of environment too, I think kind of brings down, or at least it does for me, the insecurities, and, you tap into maybe a little bit more of those vulnerable and visceral feelings, and you're able to produce something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think Iteria and I have always had that kind of like creative partnership together. And then Howard and I, and Howard and Iteria, and John and Howard. So like there's just been this like, it's just the right combination of people who definitely aren't afraid to fail in front of each other and stuff like that, to be able to find kind of the golden nuggets of like the right like songwriting composition, and the right like lyrics or messages to convey, or trial and
Yeah.
error. So that went a long way. And, that is how this record was made. There was a ton of trial and error and demoing and scrapped ideas. So we kind of took our time and made sure we found the combination of things that really struck a nerve for all of us personally before we like let it out into the world.
What I love about this record too is kind of like some of the big swings that happen musically. Kind of start out a little swing, like with a little bit of a swing feel, kind of in the pocket. I don't know that I even like necessarily expected that of you guys to begin with when I first was listening to it from start to finish, going back, kind of thinking about some of those memories, and just how it just starts, you start once you hit the chorus part, punch you right in the teeth on the first track. I mean, there's just a lot of amazing dynamics that are going on in this album too that I think kind of helps add to that emotional experience of it from the music side.
Thank you. And I think that like, those two things kind of like borrow off each other, the way
Sure.
we like, because it was the way we crafted the song order and the dynamics of the songs themselves was very intentional, and there was a lot of trial and error, and as we went we were like building that the entire time with that in mind. And then I think that plays right into like the lyric and the vocal writing, like, and
Sure.
then after that stuff starts to appear, we start to then craft based on that. So those things were absolutely like playing off each other.
Outside of like the wild things that you guys kind of you alluded to that you guys were going through personally, and how some of that maybe even showed up on this record, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, were you actually kind of writing some of this in the midst of, COVID as well? Is that where this kind of started, the creative process on this album?
Yeah, that's where it started. I would say it was like Traveling came out, the first LP, in December of 2021, and we basically had begun writing the record right then. So it was like
Gotcha.
kind of as the world was like
Turning
slowly
back
opening
on.
back up, but it
Yeah.
was like there were some hiccups in there, and we were
Sure.
still kind of like dealing with the life changes just from that, let alone some of the personal things that all of us went through between. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, there was just a million things. So like, yeah, it
Sure.
was like on the heels of that. I mean, but this one, it was a little easier for us to all be in the room together when we needed to be. Whereas Traveling, we were, a lot of that was more remote just because we were writing it during lockdowns.
I know that like there's been a lot of bands that surprisingly, even in the last few years that I've spoken to, and it's, you don't realize sometimes the length of the creative process that various bands go through, and a lot of it has to do with what they have going on personally, if they've got day jobs or other projects that they're involved with. For me, at least as a music fan, it's kind of fun to kind of sit back and kind of dissect and try to see where people were at emotionally throughout the world, and kind of map how these projects were coming into fruition, especially if big moments in time, such as, the COVID pandemic. Not to say that we aren't still dealing with some of those issues on some level, but it's not the craziness that it was there the first, year to 18 months of that. So much uncertainty of what to do. And I know a lot of things were born out of that, so some
Absolutely.
people found more time on their hands, more time to, work on creative things.
Yeah, I mean, and that it absolutely. I mean, it has to do with everyone's story at this point, I guess. But
Sure.
us. It just so happened that we basically became a band in January 2020. So that's it was coincidence, but that's when we started. And that's
Yeah.
so we had all these we had like basically made an EP like that month, and we had a tour planned with Soul Glow for that spring, and then that got scrapped. So
Yeah.
we were like, let's just make music, and then we just did it however we had to do it. That's just because we both we're just lifers at this point, so it's
Right.
just kind of what we've always done.
Yeah, it could be easy for a lot of folks to be discouraged in those moments in that circumstance for sure. I could imagine, especially man, Soul Glow. That's another band that's doing amazing things right now and starting to get the recognition that they deserve, in my opinion. And
Oh yeah.
like that NPR Tiny Desk set. I don't know if you got a chance to catch that they did. They even had like a
Yeah,
little moshing going on in there. That was
I
pretty
love it. I
fantastic.
love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan for sure.
So, thinking about things from your guys' perspective at the time, I'm sure that could be like obviously very discouraging, something to be very excited for that you were looking forward to, and not really knowing when those opportunities were going to come again.
Yeah, totally. But in retrospect, we'd probably only have one full length right now if that it didn't go that
Sure.
way. It also like I got way more into like home DIY recording, so that's like propelled us along quite a bit. And so I think that like, or maybe we would have two full lengths, but I suspect that maybe they wouldn't have. I wouldn't be as stoked on them maybe as I am. This is all
Yeah.
hypothetical, obviously, but
Sure.
it,
Sure.
it did allow the time for some of this kind of like deep digging on some of the songwriting processes.
I know you guys are a
Yeah.
band that's like really keen on actually demoing your guys' stuff out, like really hashing out the ideas, seeing how everything lays together. I think that's the biggest piece of advice that any band, even just a startup nowadays, can really benefit themselves if they have the luxury or the ability to demo their things out and look at it reflectively, of course.
Yeah, I think in this day and age, you can even use apps on your phone like
Sure.
GarageBand to get like the most rudimentary demos. And my biggest thing is like if you have the ability to do it even in the rawest of ways, you should always record your album before you record your album.
Yeah.
Like have a demo version of it that you can swap the songs around and just be able to sit there and chill and listen to it. Like listen
Yeah.
to it on drives or like smoke a bowl and listen to it or whatever. Like and just
Absolutely.
you'll get ideas that will come to you that you might axe some things or realize you're missing a piece or realize that something's too much or too little or it goes a long way. Not to mention once you actually get into a studio and you're on the clock and you have to pay
That's
somebody
right.
for it. If you know what you're doing, you've already done it. You're gonna fly through the process,
Yeah.
and you also, and then when you fly through the process, you get a little cushion time where you can maybe then experiment in the studio with
Right.
an engineer at your back, like giving you some advice and saying, let's maybe try this instead. And that goes a long way. We were able to do that with the new record because we had already made the records. I have
Right.
a demoed version that we recorded here at my house, and going in and having that luxury time to play around with some parts and extra instruments and stuff really, really went a long way for us. So
that's one thing that what opportunities I had to like record and stuff in the past. It was funny to go to places sometimes and then be surprised that you were prepared in the way that you're talking about. Like, there are
yeah,
artists that actually go and like literally start the iteration of ideas and record it. I don't have that type of money or time personally, props
no,
off to you. Hats off to you if you do, but
yeah.
that was the way I always went about stuff, make sure you got the music, the set, the tracks down, your piece down before you go to the studio, because time is valuable and time is money and you've only got so much of it.
Yeah, totally. And that's like, it's funny because that creates its own process. Like the necessity of like being a utilitarian, I think creates punk or punk adjacent music that, a lot of like bigger artists don't really know how to capture anymore because they kind of have, you could sort of like look at some larger bands like they may have a budget, but the budget is in theory sort of like infinite, like it's like there's
Right.
certain artists who like, if their budget is $100,000, like technically, like they have all the time they need to do anything they really want. And I think that if you do that enough, you might start to lose sight of the let's just get in there and be as prepared as possible and do it. But do all these like DIY things in advance. I think that creates a sound in and of itself that doesn't exist on
Sure.
the upper echelon, and that's why like the underground is what it is.
I sometimes crave that hearing that though, like translate to audio. So I do find myself like things on like the lower end of production occasionally, like actually enjoying, the way that that sounds. And I know that some of my personal taste, and maybe this works for you in the same way too, with that is like, whenever I was listening to like hardcore metalcore records in the late 90s or early 2000s that were coming out, there was a lower quality to the production in general. So it's kind of created a part of the atmosphere and the sound and the movement at the time. So anytime I hear an artist kind of revisiting some of those production choices nowadays, it usually captures me right away, because a lot of people are
I
using the same, same amp interfaces digitally, and there's a lot of crossover nowadays too with sound.
Yeah, I agree. I have a soft spot for things being a bit raw occasionally, and yeah, and I'm not a huge fan of really like big productions. Like in my opinion, production is like sort of just like a translation process, and like if you're seeking clarity and you find clarity, then mission accomplished. It's sort of that simple. But if you're someone who's like, we actually don't want clarity, we just want impact, you can get that with a quote unquote raw production. I mean, there's so
Right.
many awesome punk bands nowadays that sound that way, that they still give you like a visceral response. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that production at all. And I sometimes prefer it, so I hear you. Especially like, I mean, random record to bring up that sort of sounds that way to me is like Turmoil, like Process of, like that has sort of that quality. But man, that's like one of my favorite metalcore albums of all time.
There's just like a lot of nostalgia tied to that sort of thing for me too. Like early Poison the Well too. Like the production on some of that
Yeah,
stuff isn't like the greatest, but I
no,
love it. It was a
yeah,
time. It was a
I
happening.
absolutely.
Speaking of like raw and visceral, of course, getting back to your guys' new album, there is a lot of those moments too. And I think that that's something that really captures me for any artist, just my own personal musical taste, usually lean in that direction. And, if anybody hasn't listened to any of your work before, particularly this album, this project, Rid of Me, I think that there's a lot of comparisons that I've seen like various media outlets kind of try and make for you guys. But when I first listened to you guys, like the thing that came to mind first was bands like Slint of the 90s, like kind of that kind of raw, dissonant rock, not following any certain formula, not afraid of a little, feedback. That to me was kind of one of the more translatable comparisons. I don't know how you kind of view your guys' selves, but I've heard people call you guys noise punk, noise rock.
That is amazing to hear. I mean, we're all huge Slint fans, and like, I sort of view us as like a band who is not exactly definable. So I understand, like, we live in a time where, genre is like, especially in like the digital streaming age, like, I guess it's a necessity for the way things work. Bands like Slint and the bands that there's these bands who they've never categorized themselves, and that is sort of what influences me, and I think all of us. But how do you define that? How do you put it on
Sure.
Spotify? How do
Yeah.
the undefinable playlist, and then it would be so many things in there, it wouldn't even make sense. So yeah, that's awesome to hear, Slint. I mean, yeah, we get the noise rock thing all the time. Like, obviously, like in Fight Amp, we sort of like tried to own that a little bit. But to be honest, like, I don't quite look at any of my bands as like a prototypical noise rock band.
Sure.
I always kind of viewed noise rock as like an anti-genre, but come to find out, there's a lot of people who don't view it that way, who think noise rock is
Sure.
noise rock, and so whatever. I like a lot of
Right.
noise rock quote unquote bands just fine, but I don't think Rid of Me is one of them. I've said noise punk just because that's not. I don't know. It's noisy punk, but
Yeah.
I know that's not quite hitting the nail on the head either.
Sure.
So, but yeah,
Like I'm really drawn to bands like Shellac, Unwound. Obviously, Nirvana was a huge influence on my, preteen childhood years.
yeah,
Most of
same.
my childhood was in the 90s, so that was kind of when I was discovering my own music, and some of my first, actual CDs that I had and tapes were Nevermind and In Utero. So, I mean, and there's a little bit of that sort of sound here too with you guys, I think, that one wouldn't be too far off to say, maybe a track or two wouldn't be out of place on In Utero, at least sonically. See a lot of influences behind this.
Yeah, everything you just said are those are the things that we've been basically lifelong listeners of. I assume we're around the same age. We were basically all born in the early '80s, so these bands are they've just been in our repertoire for a very long time. Pretty much all of us got into this stuff at some point in the '90s, and again, those bands like Shellac and Nirvana and Slint and Unwound, especially, they're bands where you don't, I guess you could say noise rock, or you could just call them rock music, but they don't sound like Kiss, you know what I mean? So it's
right.
That's why we've sort of recently just been saying we're I don't know, we're just heavy rock, I guess.
Sure.
So it's hard to define these things.
Have you by chance heard Facet?
We played with them, actually. We played with them in Milwaukee.
Okay.
Yeah, they're friends of ours. They're friends of ours now. Yeah, after we played a show with them, we became friends with them. Scott Evans, who mixed our record, he recorded their album as well.
Okay.
So yeah, they're awesome. They had that. There's a very clear Unwound influence there for sure.
Yeah, they sound quite a bit like them. I try to pay attention to your guys' show flyers and see who you guys have played with and stuff. Whatever. I can't wait for you to make it out here toward the Midwest. I'm 1 hour south of St. Louis, so a lot of bands skip over St. Louis nowadays, but it's starting to get a little bit more of the heavy bands, or at least starting to stop by in the St. Louis area, because we got an amazing metal scene going on right now and heavy music, hardcore punk.
Hell yeah. When we can, we will. We have friends in Kansas City, Bobby Johnson, the Ghost is Clears, an old friend of ours. So been kind of itching to get out there and hang out with him and play Kansas City. So that if we do that, that'll all be mixed in.
I can't praise this album enough, specifically, and just everything that I hear on it. I know that you released it through, of course, Knife Hits Records, the record label that you manage yourself, Mike, and I know that you guys have had some other acts in the past that our audience should be familiar with that did a release through you guys. I believe one of our more recent guests, Nerver, their album Cash, I believe, was that not through you guys?
I did a split release with The Ghost is Clear, so I just handled the cassette. So,
okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, which is sort of myself and some of my my sister labels, as I call them, like The Ghost is Clear or Den of Wax, who helped release the vinyl of Access to the Lonely, or Brutal Panda Records I've worked with in the past. So that's sort of the way us, people with not a lot of money can make some of these records happen.
Sure.
Split them up, make them work. Yeah.
That's very cool, nonetheless. I didn't really know the backstory. I knew somehow you guys were involved with that Nerver release. Talk about the inspiration of kind of starting Knife Hits as well. I'm kind of curious to hear where that started for you. Was that just kind of out of necessity or passion, a combination of the two?
It's a combination of the two, because it's 20 years old now, believe it or not, because we started Knife Hits just as a way to release the initial Fight Amp stuff. So the very first Knife Hits release was the Fight Amp demo in 2004. It's just a demo tape. And then I'm pretty sure the second one was the very first EP, which was a 7-inch. And that was in 2005. We did a couple other mini cassette releases back then. It was just me and John, from Fight Amp, and some of the older members of Fight Amp, and a couple other friends kind of worked together on this stuff. So it was just a way to just kind of DIY things, but still have it under a moniker and under a banner, I guess, And then sometime in the mid 2000s, we, did a split release for the final Fight Amp record with Brutal Panda, and decided to do that on Knife Hits. That was kind of the comeback of it, just as a way to sort of control our own destiny, and cut out some middlemen. And then we did the same thing with the Low Dose record. And then when the pandemic hit, it was at first we'll use this to cover the Rid of Me stuff, but I had some time on my hands and I wanted to do something music related that wasn't a second band. And the best way to do that was expand Knife Hits and start releasing music for other people, in the family tree, and then also some new people too. So now I love it. So, I'm very happy that I was able to get it up off the ground more. And it's a nice project to always kind of have as my own thing,
Yeah, absolutely. We had something similar here close to the St. Louis area that was Error Records. They had an Error House. They actually had a lot of shows near Champaign, Illinois, actually, specifically. in that region.
Okay.
And
Cool.
like Nathan, who's now the drummer of Secret Shame, Nathan Landholt, he was kind of ran all that for some period of time. A really good guy, was huge in the Midwest music scene for the longest time, and he moved out East Coast and started Secret Shame with those folks and doing well
Oh,
for
cool.
himself.
Right on.
Yeah, I always loved the DIY label type, mindset and stuff too. Just everything I've ever been personally involved with musically, it was always like DIY till you die, and it was fun to figure things out on your own. Like I remember the first time I got like a template for making like CD sleeves or cassette sleeves and stuff, and just going to like copy stores and making out all that. I mean, nowadays you can basically do all this at home, but that's starting to date myself a little bit here. But
That's all
just
right.
all the love for, it's kind of nostalgia in some respects, but just the whole DIY approach. It's literal blood, sweat, and tears going into the work. So I feel like there's more of a pride behind it.
Yeah,
Whereas the cold business exchange of just like paying somebody a bunch of money to do stuff for you and you get it when you get it, sort of thing.
there's value in that approach as well, and I still like enlist like the help of people that are in places that I'm not. Like
Sure.
writers and publicists and other labels and things like that. My ethos is sort of, I wouldn't say always has been, more recently, maybe the 10 years is, you know, it's best to do things yourself until you can't, like I there's like bands and labels who will like outsource their like order fulfillment, which is like pretty common to do these days. And again,
Yeah.
if you don't have the time to do it, then and it enables you to sell things online and mail order them, like then by all means. But until like I've been offered order fulfillment for my label, but I am still able to handle it myself. So I see no reason to hand it over until I just am like, I'm overwhelmed and I
Right.
can't do this. I've had, booking agents, but I've also booked my own tours and it's the same thing. There's certain tours where I'm like, I can't handle this. I need to find help. But there's times where I'm like, okay, what do we need? Like a week's worth of shows? I think I got this. So
Right.
there's nothing wrong with, like if a label wants to release your stuff and they're
Right.
offering a great deal and they could do more than you can, by all means. But a lot of
Sure.
times, I'm like, I'm not so sure that the labels that we flirt with occasionally, at least so far, I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I could do, although, like this last record definitely kind of took it out of me a little bit. I will say I worked my ass off on it after
Yeah.
being so heavily involved from the band perspective and then being so heavily involved from the label perspective. I kind of came out the other end a little burnout. So
Oh, I could imagine.
maybe we'll get a little help on that end next time.
Yeah.
Or a
Yeah,
little more.
absolutely.
Yeah, I should say, because we did have a lot of help from many people. So
I was just reminiscing on times of old from my perspective, but DIY in 2004 is much different than DIY in 2024 nowadays too. It's not. There's a lot of things that have advanced technologically and
yeah,
accessibility wise and that sort of stuff over the last 20 years. So
I
we can
mean
still do things in the same spirit, nonetheless.
oh yeah, I mean the tours we were doing, just like the quickest anecdote, like the tours we were doing in 2004, 2005, we didn't even have. Nobody even had a cell phone on them, So there, let alone a smartphone. There wasn't even a cell phone.
Right.
Now cell phones were out. We just
Right.
none of us just had one yet. So we still were carrying
Right.
around, sacks full of quarters to hit payphones. So
Yeah.
it is a lot different now that you can do things on your phone at all times. So and again, I'm
Absolutely.
dating myself a little bit, but whatever. Yeah,
Yeah, and handle all the facets of, what being a band on the road is too, just outside of, email and ability to update on social media and make those
oh
phone
yeah,
calls that you need to make. But then you can like literally run it as a, point of sale system for merch. And I mean, there's just, it's an entirely different world for sure.
yeah, absolutely.
Now, I know we kind of hit on some of the bands that you guys have played with here in the past or coming up here shortly. I was really happy to see that you guys were on that bill with No Man for the Palestinian Relief Fundraising. Actually, they were just my last guest that I recorded with as well.
Oh, awesome.
And
Cool.
it was really cool to see that Sonny was out and recorded some material out there from Hate 56 also and got some of that stuff out. I know he's been getting kind of the shit kicked out of him for his support, and which is ridiculous, but I'm glad to see more bands standing up, standing together, making their voices heard, using their platform, because even as silly as it is, nowadays to say this. It'd be very controversial even in America 20 years ago, even, or 15 years ago, to be outspoken against what Israel is as a country right now and the things that they're doing and have done historically to the Palestinian people.
Yeah, and I mean, it's basically impossible to look away at this point. It's like
Right.
it's a mass genocide. So
Yeah.
it's so beyond fucked that I can't really argue with people on the internet about it. But
Sure.
that is why I was very happy to play that show, because it's a way to do something without arguing with people on the internet. But
Sure.
I mean, we literally had Aaron Bushnell self-immolate. So the fucking least we can do, it's like the very bare minimum is try to raise some money, I guess. It's so beyond horrific that it's beyond
Yeah.
words. I really don't even know what to say about it. It sounds like you're on the same page. So and
Yeah.
anybody, the fact that it was ever controversial to criticize genocide it shows how
bad
powerful
the politics are.
Well, and how powerful these forces are that can get people to make excuses for genocide. They're so powerful, because if it happened in your neighborhood or in your city, people would be up in arms. But somehow
Absolutely.
these powers can convince people that it's okay to kill. I don't even know how many are going to end up being killed in this current occupation or this land sweep or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, it's tragic. I don't even know what else to say, really. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a real evil intent out there, but I think, people raising awareness, even just spawning the conversation, spawning the question, doing the things that you guys are doing, aiding in relief funds and doing your part as musicians and coming out and bringing people together for a common cause. These are the winds of change in the right direction.
Absolutely. And I have to say hats off once again to No Man for putting all that together. That entire record release weekend that they had, that they raised quite a bit of money. We played one of those shows with them in Baltimore, and the show did well, and everyone in that room was on the same page. And I just, again, have to just give mad props to No Man for organizing all of that. It meant a lot to us to be able to just kind of slide in there. They're the ones that really put the work in. So hats off.
Yeah, I believe when I spoke with them, I know it was in the tens of thousands of dollars. I don't know if it was just from that particular show necessarily, but in surrounding events and fundraising. Along with that, I know that I want to say it was in the $30,000 or $40,000 range, which is incredible.
Oh wow! I didn't even know. I knew it broke $10,000. I didn't even know if it got that high. But hey, anything is amazing.
I've expressed my love for you as a musician and things that you've done over the years. How long have you really been at it now? I think maybe at least late 90s.
Yeah, I think I probably started going to shows locally in 98. I guess I had a couple of random bands in high school. My high school years were 99 to 2003. I'd say the first one that really did anything outside of just playing, in our parents' backyard or stuff like that was I was in a band called the Funeral Bird with Patrick Troxel, who played in Creepoid, and he currently plays in Lovelorn and Mugger. That was our band together. Actually, Howard, who plays in Rid-O-Me, was the drummer for that as well. And that must have been 2002, maybe. So,
Okay.
I think I was a junior in high school or something like that. And then Fight Amp started in 2004. So I wasn't even 21 yet. And we started touring and putting out releases immediately. So yeah, I basically I've been playing music since I was in middle school or something like that, but started understanding that other people were doing other punk or hardcore or metal-ish things and were around me I guess in the late 90s, and started becoming active around 2002 or something like that.
Did you start with guitar when you started your discovery of music as far as playing it?
I did, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
It's always been guitar.
Was that something that was prevalent in your family, or is it just you wanted a guitar, asked for it for Christmas, or how'd you get the first guitar?
No, it's not. My mom and dad both were not musicians.
Okay.
I just liked music. I guess there was something about the music at the time that was hitting me, like Nirvana and stuff like that. And I liked, and early punk rock, because I basically started skateboarding maybe I was pretty young. I must have been in fifth grade or something like that. And then through skateboarding, I started, paying attention to skate videos, and the music in them just was immediately striking a nerve with me. So, some of that just late 80s, early 90s, punk, and I guess you'd call it alternative rock now or something like that. Black Flag and Nirvana and, you know, and then Nirvana led to the Melvins, and you know, and all that, whatever. I can't quite remember what I was listening to at the time, but it just struck a nerve, and I was like, I want to try to do it, you know, and so, you know,
Yeah.
my parents got me, like, I think it was a Christmas present. It was like a Squire Stratocaster, you know, that I just
Right.
took a couple years to try to learn how to play. And then me and some of my friends in school started just playing in a garage around the corner and making whatever weird little riffs we could come up with. So, yeah, it was just
Where'd you
like
go to
that.
high school at?
I grew up in South Jersey in a town called West Everett.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like literally like 20 minutes from Philadelphia. So you know, I've lived here all my life. Yeah.
Yeah, I know like all that Jersey, Phil. Like I'm not extremely familiar with the area, but I know a lot of that stuff is very close to each other. So sometimes when somebody tells you they're from someplace in Jersey, it's in your case not too far from Philadelphia, or you know. So
yeah, Jersey's funny because you could say Jersey and you can mean Philly, Jersey, or New York, Jersey, or Shore,
right,
Jersey, or Mountains,
exactly.
Jersey, or or Farms, Jersey, you know, Pine Barrens, Jersey, whatever. But no, I literally grew up like under the skyline. So yeah.
Okay.
Of Philadelphia.
So man, you were in a prime area for whatever music was happening at the time too, as far as you know, being a show goer. So what were some maybe like early show going experiences that really started connecting the dots for you? Like I can actually do this outside of like playing in garages and that sort of thing.
It was going to hardcore shows for sure. I mean, like that's, you know, I wasn't super when I first started going to shows. I didn't barely even knew I knew what hardcore was because I liked hardcore punk, like that I was hearing in skate videos and stuff. You know, the
Right.
paths that like Black Flag and like Dead Kennedys led me down. So I was like aware of like that stuff, and maybe I don't remember if I quit, but I you know, I knew who the Melvins were because of Nirvana, and I knew like Battalion of Saints because of Black Flag and stuff like that. And then I started going to shows at like the local record stores in South Jersey, and there would be random like hardcore bands that would play, and then I started finding a way to get the shows in Philly, and some of my first shows in Philly were in West Philly at the Stalag and Kill Time. I can't remember the first. I actually first show I even saw there. I don't remember who played. I was so young, and it was. I don't even know if it was anyone like of note. It was probably bands that all broke up within the next like year.
How old were you?
But I did. Shit. I don't, 15 something like, you know, like I
Okay.
was young.
Yeah.
Yeah, taking a guess there, something around that. I used to go to the Melody Inn in New Brunswick, so some of the first shows were like I would see like 12 Tribes and Poison the Well and Shy Halud and a
Yeah.
lot of metalcore bands. I think Dead Guy was in there once.
Hell yeah.
I saw Zayo, you know, all the local like Floor Punch once or twice. Nora, Converge started getting mixed in, you know, a couple years after that. Orchid, you know, because like had a lot
Yeah.
of the like, even though like I remember Orchid and Poison the Well played a show here together back then, and so it was a lot of stuff like that. A lot of hardcore bands I can't remember right now. Yeah, it was that type of stuff.
There was another thing that you talked about in your musical discovery too that I had to lead into for a moment, and that was one for me as well. I was never very good at skating. Like I was kind of rollerblade, BMX, but I could never skateboard. I just couldn't get it down. But I would love to watch skate videos all the time, and there's so much
Yeah.
music discovery that happened through skate videos. I don't go seek them out nowadays. I don't know if that's still a thing. Like people find out about music through skate videos. I would think that maybe it is. You know, people are still probably, you know, watching videos and finding out bands accidentally because of it.
Yeah, it's still a thing. Like, you know, what's funny is John, who plays in Rid of Me now, who I was in Fight Amp with, he, like, over the past maybe 5 years or so, like, because him and I used to skate together back in the day, but he was a little bit older than me. So I mostly would skate with his younger brother, and he recently got way back into it. And he was always, like, really good. And, like, you know, so we used to occasionally, like, watch skate videos and stuff, like, back in the day. But, you know, he kind of, like, I can ask him questions and he'll fill me in on that culture and on, like, the skate video thing is absolutely still a thing, but a lot of them get boiled down to like shorts and stuff. But
I
you
see.
know, like because a lot of it's online. But at the same time, like
Right.
I think it's the music is still like very specifically curated, and I think they're kind of like on it. You know, like
Nice.
that hasn't changed. Right? I think a lot of skaters back in the day were like, no, I want this song. You know, I think it is still like that, and there's still some discovery there.
Yeah, speaking of discovery as well, I got to date myself real quickly. I think how I found out about Fight amp back in the day was through the Blogspot area and Mediafire. So that's how I came across you guys, was like some recommended artists on a blog of similar artists that I liked. And, I was like really into, like Torch and things like that at the time. So I'm sure it was something adjacent to that when I was going down some rabbit hole. And I know that you guys were heavy in our rotation for a while. Ridge, who does Waxing On with R&J with us and co-hosts sometimes on this pod, he and I would just play those early albums just over and over and over and over again, man. It just hit with us at the time, big time.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and you brought up those Blogspot days, and like I was heavy into that. I missed those days, actually. It was really cool. Like the fact that people could like kind of DIY curate that stuff. It didn't necessarily have to be tied to like a big publication, was like, and honestly, you're kind of doing the new version of that right now. I sort of view like these like style podcasts like are kind of carrying the torch from what that was. So that's
It's definitely a big inspiration. I can speak for myself as far as that's concerned.
Yeah.
And the ATI podcast actually started back in 2010, the first iteration of the show. But it came out of me doing Blogspot stuff. And we had a little short run, and we finally came back in 2022, that is. So, but I will say pridefully that, and I don't mean to sound like an asshole, because this is like my free time. And so I want to talk to people that I'm actually interested in, music that I actually like. So you're not missing, the head of the nail whenever you're saying, we're kind of doing the same thing, because, I'm familiar with the artists. I don't want to waste your guys' time or anybody else's. And, I want to be impassioned about what I'm talking about, though, too, So when I tell folks that it's a real treat, my audience probably gets tired of hearing me say that, but it genuinely usually is,
Hey, I hear you. That's awesome, because that's kind of the way I treat like the label, and that's, like I kind of like, I have to like know how to like talk about something and be stoked about it. If I don't know how to do those two things, like how could I ever tell other people like to like it or to even give it a shot? Because like I have trouble I'm not really good at like faking the funk, you know what I mean? Like if I'm not into something, I'm like, I don't know, like so
I always liken it to like sales.
Yeah.
It's like I could never do sales. Like it's just like the most soulless job to me. There's some people that can do it and they do it well.
Oh yeah.
Hats off to them if that's your bag, but I can't do that. Like, sometimes folks reach out to me about doing the show, and I'm just like, I have to find a nice way to tell them, no, I want everybody to, have their chance, but I'm sure you have to kind of do that running a label as well. You can't say yes to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of time and energy and money that, has to get thrown all over the place. And I'm just like one guy. So like, even that, I actually say no to a lot of things that I'm genuinely like stoked on. So let alone the things that I am not so stoked on. Like I legitimately pretty on the regular am turning things down that I'm like, I actually do like this,
I could hear that part of it too, for sure. We were talking before we started recording, and that was, I was telling you how I was trying to scale things back this year, and
exactly.
It's been just as busy as like I've recorded like 5 podcasts in 10 days. So, it's,
that's a lot.
Yeah, but when opportunity knocks, sometimes I know you guys are hard workers like this, and I share in that spirit. Is it's like nobody's going to do the work for you. You got to put in the work yourself.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, I know that's a big thing that has always attracted to me to you as a musician, Mike, is a very bootstraps, grassroots type of feel to you. Everything that you've ever done musically, it's all on display with Red of Me now. I cannot encourage folks enough to check this album out. I know we've got you guys on Bandcamp. They can hit you up there. They can hit you guys up on Knife Hits Records. I think the album's even available on Amazon. Not that I'm encouraging folks to go that route. Please go to their Bandcamp, because I noticed this recently, and I don't know, I guess I overlooked this previously, is how you guys have, you guys even have like a cassette lot of basically your entire recorded discography for Rid of Me that folks can get. I know there's only a select amount left, but I mean, that's a good way to start off your relationship with these guys, is, hop in there and get one of those cassette lots, check out what they've got going on.
Yes, please do.
Before I cut you loose, Mike, and you've been so generous with your time, I wanted to ask you just a few little personal taste type questions, just to spice things up, get people to know you personally a little bit better in your musical taste. And maybe I'll start with, could you possibly present a few artists for us that are on a short list, a wish list, if you will, for you guys to play with, that you kind of feel like collectively everybody's kind of locked in on? Like, what would be kind of like a dream band for you guys to open for? I know there's so many good ones, and it's probably hard to narrow it down. You can give me a couple if you want. Yeah.
Like,
I'm for it. Impossible, possible, I don't care. Throw them all at me.
Yeah, sure. PJ Harvey.
There you go.
Yeah. Geez, I don't know. We actually Unwound was kind of one of those bands for a while, and we almost were able to play a couple of those shows on the East Coast recently. It fell through, unfortunately, but it was within grasp, which to me I was like, wow, if you would have told me that 10 years ago, I would have been like, no way, that's
yeah.
And honestly, tough question. Maybe Queens of the Stone Age would be pretty cool.
Hell yeah, I can get down with that.
Yeah. There's some bands that I know we can play with that we just don't know each other and stuff that I'm a huge fan of. There's this band from the Bay Area called Marbled Eye that I love. They just put out a record. Yeah, I would love to play with them. I think that we could play with each other. So I think that runs the gamut of impossible to possible pretty well.
Okay. Well, you had to give the PJ Harvey shout out, of course, because of PJ Harvey has "Rid of Me" song. I think the band's named after, right?
Yes. I don't, maybe Shellac, that'd be a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. I could definitely see that one too. Speaking of which, I think it'd be interesting if folks haven't caught on or aren't familiar with your guys' work, some of the covers that you guys have done in the past as well. You've done a Shellac cover. You guys have done a Interpol cover, which was a nice surprise as well. I like those first two Interpol records myself. It's kind of my favorite of what they've done. And then you guys got the Sheryl Crow cover too, which is pretty amazing.
Yep.
I don't think people would expect, and that's quite the range of artists to be covering as well.
Yeah, a lot of that was born of the pandemic because we were making an LP as we were writing Traveling. We were also kind of being like, oh, we can't even do anything else, so let's do just some random fun bullshit. So we kind of just made a list of covers, songs that obviously Shellac Prayer to God is sort of you might expect us to do that, but the Sheryl Crow song you would not. So we tried to put together a list of songs that were maybe some you would expect and maybe some you wouldn't, but songs that we know that we can aesthetically because that Sheryl Crow song, if it makes you happy, aesthetically, the way it's presented, it kind of has a country twang. You might not quite dig it, but the song itself is super well written and it's a good song.
Definitely.
So our goal there was to take it and just present it through a different lens because it is a good song. And we slowed it down, we down-tuned it just a little bit, changed a couple parts, and I think we were able to do what we wanted. Same with the Interpol song. We were like, what if we kind of made this? What if we turned the distortion pedals on, basically, and made it a little faster, and dig it in more of a post-punk song just a little bit. And so, but it was all we basically just made a list of covers and sent our drummer to the studio. He recorded all of them to a click. And then little by little, we just recorded all of them at my house. And all those covers, I recorded everything besides the drums and mixed. So it's just been kind of a fun project to do as in between things, we never had some master plan or anything like that. It was just a way to make more music together other than just the songs we're writing.
What are some artists that you would say are pretty prevalent on your present day playlist? And I know that sometimes we as musicians and fans of music like to go back to old stuff, so it's fine to throw some of that in there, but I'm curious to hear maybe some newer artists that are heavy in your rotation.
Yeah, so I brought up that band Marbled Eye from the Bay. I can't recommend them enough. They have a record, I think it's from 2018, called Leisure. I love it. Their new record, I think it's called Read the Air. Also love it. It just came out maybe a month ago or something. So highly recommend that. It's Bay Area post-punk stuff. The new Gouge and the new Metz, aside from playing with them on Saturday, both records, as soon as I heard them from front to back, I love both. I love both bands have embraced their own growth. Those are two records that just came out that I love. Yeah, what else has been? I kind of always go back to some of the same stuff. I've been listening to a lot more Portishead lately. Just I don't know why. It's just been something that's hitting me. I've been putting a couple birthday party records on the turntable again lately. Just kind of randomly. So I've been digging a lot more back into the Cursed catalog.
Hell yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I love Cursed and all of Chris's bands, but lately when I'm in the mood, those have been hitting just right.
Oh yeah, I can see that for sure. I know that like some of the newer stuff that I particularly have been into. I don't know if you've heard that new Infant Island record, but that
No,
that
but I'm
that's
I'm a
pretty
fan.
great.
Cool. There's so much that's on my radar. I'm a fan of that band, so I
Yeah,
should dig into that as soon as possible. You brought up Facet too, the record that they
yeah,
put out. I mean,
right.
it's been a few months now, but great record. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that was a great record as well. It came out late last year,
yeah,
I think. Yeah, and
yeah, right,
boy, there's so many bangers out there. You mentioned Gouge Away. That new album is just incredible, and to hear the
yeah,
backstory on how they actually recorded that, I didn't realize that until I got the LP and I was reading. I guess it was like a banded sleeve they had on the back that was like Gouge Away recorded this all to tape. Every edit's been made. It's a splice, and the instruments recorded live without a track, and the vocals recorded separately in a booth. And I was like, I
yeah.
cannot
Super
believe
cool.
how distinct all the tracks are that they recorded that all in the like it's incredible because it's so many times I tried to record live with bands in the past and it was you just never could get that exact separation that you desired on in
Oh
particular
yeah,
moments and
yeah.
boy how well was that recorded and turned out. That's
I think it.
incredible.
Yeah, even just like the fact that they leaned into like doing it that way. I think that they probably like stumbled on to being like, oh, like this is our magic. Like this is
Yeah,
how we
I
capture
agree.
our magic. Like I don't know if they knew that was going to happen or not, but like it kind of seems to me that they were like, let's give this a shot, and they started doing it. Probably like, oh, it's happening. Like because that's
Yeah,
it. That process really lends itself to the way that band sounds, and you
I
know,
agree.
I they probably know that now. I don't know if like because I could see maybe wanting to try that sometime, and I'd be like, I have no idea if this is gonna work.
Yeah,
Like
for sure, for sure.
yeah. So
It's a
yeah, but
gamble. Yeah,
very
you don't
very
know.
cool. Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I think that even Christina Michelle had posted like to something to that effect, like we've discovered like this is how we need to do things. So like
That's
yeah, they
awesome.
definitely
Yeah,
that's up there with like my favorite albums this year without question. It's just unbelievable what they were able to get to translate out of that, knowing what that production was behind that.
yeah,
That's
yep.
one of those rare lightning in the bottle type moments, man. You can't hardly beat that.
Exactly. And it's also like pure time and place, which is so this thing that we all do, like at least on this level, like
Mhm.
time and place is such a big part of it. Like you and I talking about some
Yeah,
of that late 90s, early 2000s stuff and how the production, you're like, I can almost embrace it because it's so time and place. And like they doing it that way, they truly captured the time and place, which I love.
What would be a dream? And I know that you just mentioned you started to get into production side of things as well. I don't know if you've went down many of these rabbit holes, but is there like a dream opportunity with like a piece of recording equipment, like maybe a certain console or something like that you desire, or a particular? Maybe we can lean it back more toward instrument focused, or maybe like a what's like kind of the golden chalice instrument wise. Would it be a dream instrument for you to have, perhaps that you would want
Huh.
to record with?
Yeah, I don't know. I That's kind of never been my focus. Like I'm definitely a gear guy. Like I've like collected and bought and sold like a ton of cool used gear throughout the years. But I'm kind of a believer that once you like find your way, you can kind of take old cool amps and you can just like morph them into what you need. I don't really think that there's like any kind of holy grail of like cabinets or amps. There's some that are really cool, but the most expensive, coolest, like raddest gear ever might be the wrong thing for a guy that's trying to get like
Sure.
some other sound. So I sort of
Yeah.
I don't know. Like as far as like recording goes, like we've recorded some sick consoles and stuff. Like I don't. I'm pretty happy with the things we've done and the things we can do. So I don't know if there
That's
is
awesome.
anything like that. Yeah, off the top of my head. So yeah.
Yeah, so with you saying some of the things that you said, it's kind of got me curious. Is there anything pedal board wise or gear wise that you run that you think that's like just mandatory for achieving what sounds that you're going for, Mike?
Short answer, no, no. I think that I could take some used gear and find a way to make it sound the way I want it. I have a very particular sound, but I don't
Sure.
think that I don't think that I use anything that like is so specific.
Yeah.
However, I've been using rat pedals for a very long time. I've been using
Yeah.
Music Man amps for a very long time. I've been using bare knuckle pickups for a very long time. I just I just know that I could, like, none of those things are so crazy that I couldn't take another thing and kind of plug and play
Sure.
into it. I've also
Sure.
used V4 amps and gotten a sound out of it that I could work with. I like PV amps a lot too. I know a lot of people don't, but
No, yeah, they're great. They're prevalent all over the
yeah,
Midwest.
yeah. I know Matt Perrin is a big PV guy, so that's.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
yeah, I just like, I think that it's more about like just finding like your where your frequencies can lie within the thing that you're doing, and like
Yeah.
what sort of like fuzz or distortion you want and how to apply it and all those things. And I've never been a big pedal guy either. I kind of just like I'm sort of a bare bones, like,
Sure.
I mean, I have like a splitter, a tuner, a reverb pedal, a rat, and a boost, and that's all that's on my pedal board. So it's just kind of,
Hell yeah.
it's pretty bare minimum. Yeah, I'll occasionally mix in a delay, but I only use it for
Yeah.
noise, to be honest. So,
Yeah, I hear you.
yeah.
There's a lot of that. I mean, like, I play a little guitar as well, and like the whole pedal thing was like so intimidating for me for the longest time. I'd be in bands with guitar players and bass players and see their pedals and start to learn about them by proxy, you know. But
Yeah.
until I actually started, like, I think they're easy to be intimidated by, but you know, once I started getting familiar with them, they weren't as intimidated. You know, once you kind of know the lay of the land. But there's a point to kind of what you're saying too. Is that if you know what sound that you're trying to achieve, there's a lot of that can be dialed in. A lot of that through just your playing in general, your playing
Yep.
style. You can achieve a lot of things that people don't realize, and they think that a pedal's a necessity. It's certainly a creative enhancer, but it's not a necessity.
Sure. Yeah, I think like when it comes to that stuff, if I were to like talk to younger people starting bands and stuff, is like just start small and build. Never like take like 8 steps at once. Never go, well, I'm going to get a pedal board and I need these 8 different things. You don't. Like, all you really need is a tuner, and then after that, if you want to run 2 amps, all you really need is like an ABY, and then if you want distortion, all you really need is a distortion. So it's just like, just go one step at a time and build, and just find what works for you, and then eventually you go, by the way you're playing any instrument, but guitar especially, you might just hit a point where you say, this is it. This is all I really need. And you might eventually come up to a moment where you go, oh, you know what? It would be nice to have a little bit of this here. But I see people who like want to start bands or brand new in bands. They'll buy like a ton of pedals, and then they get this option paralysis and don't quite know how to use them. And you really don't. Fight Amp did a tour. The last Fight Amp tour we did was with I Hate God. Those guys plug directly into their amps. They don't even use tuners, and they sound great, like they right in, and just, that's it, right into the amp.
Yeah.
They're just solid. Yep. And then they tune before the set, solid state amps, and they sounded awesome. That's, so you don't need a ton of pedals.
I agree. I think it's all sound advice without question. Out of curiosity, what would be, let's say I was going to send you off to an island and you could only take 4 albums with you. So we're going to do the old Mount Rushmore numbers. What would be those 4 albums that you would take with you?
Oh, God. People ask me this stuff sometimes, and every single time I forget what I say, and I forget that I was asked the question. So the next time it's asked, I'm like,
it's nice. You can just put out those other ones that you didn't cover the last time, so you got all the bases covered, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, God. I don't know. Like, I'm the type of music listener who, like, I just, every day, like, it's all based on my mood. I'm not a big, like,
I agree.
When people are like, all right, I hate to elaborate more. I'm just going to continue to not answer the question.
Just vamp away.
Yeah, exactly. The question that all right, like the death row meal. Like, I don't know. That's a good one where I'm like, I truly don't know. I even like, I don't have a favorite color. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's tough for me. I don't know if I have to really.
Maybe it would make it easier for you if I was like, okay, you could have the entire catalog of this artist. Would that make it any easier for you to kind of narrow down?
No, I don't know, because of course, like, I can't help but go back and be like, some of the best like guitar playing and like blues, like psych rock stuff of all time is like Jimi Hendrix, but like I don't necessarily want to listen to the Jimi Hendrix Experience on a desert island over and over.
I hear you.
So and like, what it like, man, it's just such a goddamn hard question for me.
How about something on a more personal side? What would you say is the most important or maybe the most special gift that you've ever received in life?
That's a hard one too. Most special gift I've ever received. Man, that's tough because, you start to think about family and stuff.
Yeah.
What's your answer for this one?
It is hard to settle on just one thing, but if anything's special enough in your life that you've actually received, it's got some meaning to you, so it's never the wrong answer. Like with this, I would have to say, as corny or cheesy it might sound, be like the first drum set that I ever received. It was my dad's drum set.
Sure.
And he was a drummer, and
awesome.
He kind of gave up drumming and that sort of stuff. So that was my first drum set. I regrettably look back on selling it to my own brother. I should have just gave it to him because I was just trying to buy a double bass pedal or something at the time. There was a specific reason that I charged him whatever I charged him for it. I would probably go with that because, if I didn't become a drummer, I wouldn't have went on all these musical discoveries and, it's kind of just a Pandora's box.
Yeah, actually that helped me figure out my answer, and it's probably my parents getting me my first cassette deck when I was a kid, because that was the first way I ever had to play my own music was a cassette deck, and that set me down a path for sure. So that's probably my answer. I have some more modern day things, I think, but I'll go with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard because you kind of go back and do that butterfly effect thing, and you try to decide, like, well, if this didn't happen, then what if this happened with me or whatever? But I think you picked a good point in time, though, too, with that cassette deck choice, because a lot of things, kind of similar to my example, may have not happened for you if you hadn't made those discoveries having that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to think about it, too. I'm sure later I'm going to sit back and be like, oh, man, that
forgot that one thing.
Same with the album. Yeah, right. I'm going to come up with the albums all probably at like 3 a.m.
So. All right. Well, you just shoot me an email. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
So we got it covered, right? Then you can really think about it.
Right on. Yeah, absolutely.
Mike, thank you for humoring me and my questions at the end. I know sometimes,
of course.
Making people think, and I know you're at a later hour than I am, so I appreciate you hanging in late and getting the conversation in. And I really think folks, if they weren't already fans of you or familiar with your work, after they hear what songs we're going to be playing today on this episode for folks to check out, and we'll of course have those links in the episode details for you guys to get out and support if you like what you're hearing from Rid of Me. Mike, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Man, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, this is Barrett from the ATI podcast. Episodically, I will be chatting with a featured guest bringing a spotlight to their craft. Artists, musicians, filmmakers, actors, small businesses, athletes. Nothing is out of bounds. Hear my discussion with rising talents and entrepreneurs across all traditional podcasting platforms, as well as YouTube. Like what you hear? Be sure to subscribe to the podcast channel of your choice, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. Just click the subscribe button and leave us a 5-star rating. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube, where you can get full video episodes of the ATI podcast and see our guests in their work. Stay in touch with our ongoings, events, and guest list across all major social media outlets: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, X. Just search the ATI podcast. We would like to thank you all for your continued support, and as always, stay safe out there. Hey there, this is Barrett from the ATI podcast, here to talk about what we have going on the ATI podcast network. First, we'll start with Waxing On with R&J. The format of Waxing On with R&J is audible selections made exclusively by our hosts and brothers, Ridge Jackson and Jake Jackson. Waxing On with R&J is sure to tickle your inner eardrums with some of the most vile tones you've ever encountered, and conversely, ear candy with pop melodies, focusing on spotlighting underground and rising artists. Waxing On with R&J is another outlet of the ATI podcast community to bring awareness to many musicians' craft. Also found on the ATI podcast network, Nod Narb's Closet, hosted by Brandon Stewart of Edos Inn. Nod Narb's Closet is a wing of the ATI podcast programming that delves into the world of roleplay games, miniature painting, diorama making, occasional pro wrestling match watch-alongs, providing commentary with a dash of jocularity and satire, and much, much more. Of course, leading the pack is the ATI podcast. On the ATI podcast, we episodically invite guests onto our show to spotlight their talents, whether that's musicians, filmmakers, artists, actors, businesses, even athletes. Nothing is off the table. The focus of the ATI podcast and its collective creative arms, whether that's Waxing On with R&J or Nod Nard's Closet, is to bring awareness and focus to people's talents. Be sure to follow us across all traditional podcasting platforms, and for the full experience, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search the ATI podcast. Stay safe out there.